All right, so we are on the era of Andrew Jackson. Not many people have their time period named after them. All right, so why is that? Well, where do we begin here, right? I think I'll begin with de Tocqueville. Okay, de Tocqueville came into um, the United States to look into our penitentiary system. And he became so interested in things American that he ended up writing Democracy in America instead, which has become a modern classic. And what he says, right, is he states that this generation in the 1820s and 1830s in the United States, it's very, very egalitarian. It puts everyone at equal footing. All right. It's against privilege of any sort. It's against putting on airs of any sort. It is against entrenched powers, and it's for equality of economic opportunity. All right. And an example that you see in that is in the Charles River Bridge case decision decided by the Supreme Court, whereby they made it clear that this is a land of opportunity, and a group of Dartmouth gentlemen who had received a business charter to build a bridge, that it was not implied that they had a monopoly in that area over the Charles River, but that you could, if you have a Home Depot, you could put a Lowe's right across the street and freely compete with them. And so, at any rate, going back to the culture, being egalitarian, is they still had their you have contradictions in any culture in any institutions, and one contradiction here is that there was a sort of sense of deference and hero worship of a certain demographic, and that demographic was the self-made man, right? The man who had started with nothing and had made something of himself through his own merits. Okay. And so, with that in mind, um, Richard Hofstadter states that Andrew Jackson had offices fall into his hands like ripe fruit from a tree. Okay. It was the perfect time for him. For one, he was Scots Irish, and Scots Irish were considered scum of the earth by some gentrymen in the South. North Carolina asked them to pass on through, that they're not welcome during the Revolutionary War. They found the Cumberland Gap through Daniel Boone, and many of them moved into present day Tennessee and Kentucky, including the parents of Andrew Jackson. His father died in a logging accident while his mother was pregnant with him. And by the time he was about 12, at the end of the War for Independence, his mother and brother had died, okay, of illness. And so he was orphaned at a young age. And so he apprenticed himself to an attorney. He became a land surveyor. And those are typical ways of trying to make your way out of poverty, particularly in the West. Um, he became a judge and a big land speculator. And but he did it supposedly on his own merit. All right. And so he maintained that frontier image with the kind of petulant, quick temper and sense of pride that ironically the common people had borrowed from the gentry class. Um, he uh, he kept he kept that notion, right, of the sagacity of the common man, that the common man is not educated at this time. He's not, uh, you know, intellectually gifted, but he has a wisdom about people, about life, how life works, right? A very pragmatic, very practical sense of wisdom that enables him to participate in government and for it to go well. All right. And so he is going to, time and again, when he does something that he believes is on behalf of the common man, used the term mandate, like you have the Spanish mandato, which means a command, that he has the mandate, the command from the people that this is what they want, and therefore this is what they ought to receive. Okay. Also, kind of concurrent with that culture, and as a somewhat of a product of it, the political system became more democratized than it was prior to the 1820s. So first of all, the franchise, right? As you recall, when we did the Constitution, the founding fathers left the decision up to the states to make requirements for citizenship, and they began to, almost without exception, drop their property requirements for to be a citizen. And so now the poor, landless, sharecropping white men could be included in the franchise as citizens. All right. Then you also look at the system of running for office. Now they devised the party convention system, whereby if you become as a citizen a member of one of the political parties, you go to the local meeting. You can opt for yourself, for anybody, to become a candidate, and they vote on it by popular majoritarian decision right then at the convention. And then if it is a national office, they'll go from the local to the state convention, and then winners of the state convention go to a national convention, and the winners at the national convention are nominated. So now theoretically, Joe Bob, and coming from his log cabin in Tennessee, can run for president, can run for congressman, etc. So they democratized that. They even flirted with the idea of getting rid of the electoral college system and going by just popular vote for the president and vice president. But of course, as we still have it, you know that that did not prevail. Also, political participation. It's crazy. I don't know how they're able to devise these numbers, but when you look at Alan Brinkley's textbook and you look at the back, it shows the percentage of eligible voters who went to the polls and voted for the president. And it gets up, you guys, to like 79% of the eligible citizen voters actually voted for president. I mean, what are we at in the 40s of the percentile now? So that's just crazy. And a lot of them had parades, rallies, and other types of some people would say gimmicks to let the people feel like they were a part of the political process. All right. Many of the judges and sheriff positions at the local arena became elective instead of appointed at this time. So there were some democratizing trends that were definitely going on. And then there's the famous anecdote of a Frenchman aristocrat coming into a tavern out on the frontier, and he is affronted in one manner or another by a common, dirty, poor American frontiersman. And he feels the need to remind that person of who he is back in France, of his titles and his nobility and his wealth and his possession of lands, etc. And the guy supposedly spits tobacco on his shoe and says, that might mean something back in France, but that means nothing here. And then walks ahead of him into the tavern. And so anecdotes like that are telling of this type of culture, right? And so, at any rate, with that as the foundation, as their culture, as the democratization of some of their political practices and institutions, then you get into the specifics that seem to make more sense. So first of all, right, you have access to credit. A lot of people believe that Nicholas Biddle's Bank of America was a plutocratic institution, that it served the rich and about the rich only. They only made very comfortable, very safe loans to wealthy people with a lot of collateral. And so, the common guy, right? As they say often, it takes money to make money. An aspiring would-be entrepreneur needs a beginning business loan. And of course, the main entrepreneurial route at that time was through cash crop farming. And so, at any rate, the common voter, he wanted access to credit. So, Andrew Jackson, right, he refuses to recharter the bank and he puts the money out into these local wildcat banks. And the banks, kind of like the 2008 bubble, were quite reckless and irresponsible with their loans to common, poor, ambitious white farmers, cash crop farmers. And it's going to help bring about a depression, an economic depression in 1837. But hey, that's what the voters wanted, right? They want access to credit. They want access to land, obviously. So then you get into arguably the most famous or infamous chapter of Jacksonian era America, and that is with the five civilized tribes. So the Cherokee, for instance, received, uh, remember, they are seen as a nation, a sovereign nation within the nation. In the McIntosh case, they were declared to be wards of the state, dependent upon the federal government, but not the states. And so, by virtue of the magnanimity of the federal government, they were granted Ishota, their land in present day Carolinas and Georgia. And in Ishota, right, there was quite a level of assimilation that happened uh, in this Cherokee Republic. So for instance, let me get to some of it. Um, this looks like this is a later version, darn it, because I have it in blue in the more updated version, and I have a long paragraph just on some of the things that were demonstrating a level of enterprise, as they called it back then, being economically progressive uh, amongst the Cherokee. And you'll know why they called them the civilized tribes, the five civilized tribes. At any rate, I'll give a go at my memory here. Um, they had churches, they had a school system for the children, they had a written language and their own newspapers. They devised a federal republic that, yes, was modeled after largely ours. Um, they had grog shops where they engaged in metallurgical enterprises. They had cash crop farms galore. And so, they were assimilating. They were absolutely assimilating. They even had slaves. And so, nevertheless, Georgia and the Carolinas, they started issuing eminent domain laws. And remember, with eminent domain, right, we go into the assumption today that they better build a hospital there, right, or an interstate freeway. If they're going to make me as a private individual have to sell my property at market value to the government for the greater good. But that's exactly what they contended here is they had the Cherokee and other tribes. They put pressure upon them to sell their lands to the state government at market value for the common good. And of course, the voters just simply coveted their land. And they had tried by hook and crook in several ways to get that that land from them, right? There were several treaties. I have other documents that could show more evidence of that. If you'll bear with me here, you may not be able to see this just yet as I'm sharing. But let's see here. Um, Not comparing wars for independence. Let's see here. Pardon me. Prelude to an expansionist republic. All right. So here, right, you have the Ohio Valley. They put it at $1.25 an acre. They put the minimum amount of acreage that you could buy down to 640 and the down payment down to 100. That made it attainable for a lot of people, compared to years prior to that, to those amends, those changes. Um, they tried again and again to get, I think, where I get into East Florida or West Florida. Let me get into West Florida. So let's see here. They had, I want to get into the exact treaties that were established. I was almost positive that I had done so. Let's see here. Not filibustering. They didn't go that far with the Cherokee and others. Let's see here. Maybe it is under East Florida. Pardon me. At any rate, I have it somewhere where I have exact treaties, okay, that were created in which the Creek and some of the other five civilized tribes they applied much pressure, much inducement to get them to sell some of their lands, which they did. But then it hit a wall. All right. You get a new generation of Major Ridge and his son and others that are leading the Cherokee, and they finally said, no, enough is enough. We're not selling any more of our lands. All right. And that's where you get these eminent domain laws. So they take it in the form of the Worcester case. They take it to the Supreme Court, and the Cherokee win. William Wirt very wisely, instead of appealing to the humanitarianism of the judges, appeals to their federal instincts. And their federal instincts always taught them that there is to be a supremacy of the federal government over the states. And so what he contended is, are you trying to say to us that a mere state eminent domain law can overthrow, right, eradicate a federal treaty that granted a Shota to the Cherokee? And of course, they weren't willing to do that, to concede that, especially as a precedent for the future. So at any rate, they defended the Cherokee and said, no, there was a federal treaty that gave them that land and a mere state law that told them they had to sell it. So the federal treaty prevails, they get to stay. And that's when, right, President Jackson claims that he has a mandate from the people, from the voters. This is what they want, to forcefully remove and purchase the land of the five civilized tribes. All right. His rationale is pretty predictable. He states, right, that despite attempts made by the Cherokee, that I find this to be a bit ironic because they were absolutely demonstrating a propensity to assimilate to things American. But at any rate, he said that Native Americans are incapable of full assimilation. And because they are incapable of such, they will always be in their society incompatible with the white man. And as they are incompatible, conflict is inevitable. And in that conflict, it is inevitable that the white man will win. So therefore, to prevent that from happening, for the protection as the wards of the state, the Native Americans, he said, I'm going to forcefully remove them to Indian territory in present day Arkansas and Oklahoma. All right. So hence they inaugurated the Trails of Tears, whereby they said, even the warriors are weeping. Um, and so the one infamous one, you had almost a third. You had almost a third of the forced migrants die in the process of the trek to Indian territory. All right. When they came to the Indian territory, there was a lot of stagnant water and disease, particularly dysentery, spread amongst the Native Americans. You also had these licensed white merchants who came in and sold them things at exorbitant prices. Yes, they were to receive annuities, right? Annual stipends and an array of supplies of different products. But the argument is, right, is that the government is making the Native Americans dependent upon it, right? So no matter how generous those annuities are, it's an act of power and domination to keep them in need of the American government for their common necessities. And then, of course, Major Ridge's son, John Ridge, and Major Ridge will be murdered by their own warriors for conceding and signing the eminent domain treaties. All right, by their own people, sadly. So in some cases, right, as I say at the end of this, democracy could be like two wolves and one lamb voting on what's for dinner, right? So at any rate, that kind of covers this up. And so covers this topic broadly anyway, that be careful what you ask for, right? That the masses, the majority, can become just as tyrannical over the minority, the numerical minority, as one person, one tyrant can be, as one small oligarchy can be, etc. And that is something to think about. Because with populism, right? With populism, to me, it's the ugly side of the coin of representative democracy, is that the reps, they play upon the negative emotions and negative sentiments and thoughts of their voters. So if they're xenophobic against Black people, against Native Americans, against Mexicans and Mexican Americans, then you run with that as their elected rep and you use it, you whip up that anti-other rhetoric to unify one another in something that you're against. And so populism can be very ugly. All right. And so they knew, right? These elected reps, they knew what their voters wanted. These new, especially the new poor, white, ambitious men. They wanted easy access to the American dream in the form of easy credit, Native American lands, etc. All right. The Charles River Bridge case, business contracts, etc. All right. So at any rate, yeah, if you have time, Alexa de Tocqueville's Democracy in America is just an incredibly interesting, for lack of a better adjective. Yeah, Democracy in America, it's called. And it's something else. But he says, right, Americans will they'll begin building a cabin, and before the roof is finished, they're discontent and they want to move on to something bigger and better. Okay. He said, there's not much freedom of thought, especially for intellectuals, that, lest you look like you are putting on airs in some way, the majority of people will not abide it. Okay. So at any rate, and it's no coincidence that this is a time in which the Scots-Irish and Southern migrants into East Texas are going to take that from Mexico. All right, it kind of goes with this time period, goes with this culture, goes with this theme. All right, of somewhat you know, rhetoric of equality of economic opportunity, egalitarianism supposedly, but also the tyranny of the majority, for sure. And de Tocqueville was not always bragging. He was not always proud and boasting when he wrote of Americans. All right. So you guys have a good week. I wish you well. All right.